Today I'm going to be fitting a NIStune Type 4 board to an R34 ECU, so I just thought I'd show you how it's done. We have a NIStune board, and when you open your packet you'll also find that you have a adapter to go with the board, which will be fitting into the ECU, and some screws to bolt her down when we're all done. First part is obviously to remove your covers. Have a look what's inside. Hopefully it's all nice and clean, hasn't been flooded, burnt, bashed, smashed. This one looks perfect. And it looks just as good on the back. Okay, where we're going to be working tonight is this row of headers along here. So we'll need to remove our conformal coating from here right through to here. And on the other side, same deal. This one here, right through to here. We're actually quite lucky on this side, the conformal coating hasn't gone all the way. I'm not sure if you can see that line along there, but the coating's covering all this part of the ECU, and they've actually left the header open for us, which was really good of them. There are also some jumpers down here, which we'll be dealing with. I'll show you some more details on those later once the camera focuses. So these ones in this area here. To remove your coating, just grab a bristle brush and some acetone and just work it in there. This ECU has very little coating on this side, so that's handy for us. I'll give that a bit of a clean anyway. Now, jumpers on the R34 ECU are these little suckers here, J903 and J904. Both have to be moved to the blank spots next to them. This one has got a fair bit of coating on around the jumpers. They're fine little suckers, so you want to make sure that that's well cleaned. I'll give you problems. Get in there with the cotton bud, nice and clean, and then over to the other side. Same deal along here. It's labelled as W100 on this ECU, but once again you'll find all the details in the NIStune documentation that you get from the NIStune website. So it's this row here. This is a manual ECU. On an auto ECU, this row of pads there will have a little daughter board mounted to it, similar to this one here. Which makes it a little bit more difficult to access things, but not too bad. Now, before beginning any soldering work on this, it pays to heat it up a little bit with the heat gun. Makes everything work just that little bit better, so I'll do that now. Bit on the other side as well. Don't get just too carried away with that, because these chips here are your main processor chips, so you do not want to damage those little suckers, or this thing is going to be a brick. Okay, flip him over, and now we'll put some flux on those pads. I'll put some flux on those jumpers we were talking about before at the same time, and then we can get stuck into desoldering those. I've got a Hacko 470 desolderer. I'm using a 0.8mm tip on it. Now, like most of these things, you'll find your power and ground on the end, so those two pins there can be a bit of a problem, as well as up this end, that one can be a problem. But I'll see how we go. We've just heated that up with a heat gun, so yeah, they're fine. The heat gun and the application of flux really does make a difference. There are 40 of these, so it does take a little while. Try not to push too hard against the pads with your desoldering iron. You just want to be quite gentle with it. They are quite delicate, these pads, so you can damage them if you start getting brutal. Alright, there's our last one. I'll dwell on that one for a few seconds because I know that will take a lot of heat. I think that's okay. You can see the extra copper around there that tends to suck your heat away. But I think that one's worked okay. Once you've desoldered those holes, just flip the ECU over and hold it up to the light and have a good look to make sure all of the holes are properly desoldered, or you'll have trouble fitting the adapter. Alright, now for the fun part, the moving of the jumpers. These are tiny on these ECUs. So one technique is just to remove both of these jumpers and then put a solder bridge across there. J903 has to go to J902 and J904 has to go to J905. So what I normally do is remove these completely. So using a big blade tip, just try and get a solder bridge each end, like so, and then get in there with your tweezers. Come on, Mr. Solder Bridge. Sometimes they can be a bit of a pain, especially when you've got the soldering iron at a low angle like I have at the moment. There we go. Get him off. I'll try and do better with the second one. Give him a push. Sometimes they'll go astray like that. Get rid of those little suckers. Okay, so we want a solder blob across here and across here. I'll just tidy these pads up. It's got those nasty little peaks on it. Okay, now the idea is to clean up any flux and gunk that you've got on there. Get that nice and clean, and then we go in again with our soldering iron. I'm going to use some 0.8mm solder for this. So what we do is we just build these up. There we go, that's how it should be done. Just build up the other side. And then just give that another quick clean up, just to make sure that we've done as we intended. That doesn't look too bad. Next job is fitting our adapter. This is how it will come. It has a little paper covering over the pins, so just pull that off. Just be very gentle with these pins. They're rather delicate and they need to be straight to go in the holes. So grab your adapter, big bit over to the left as per the install manual, and then into the holes. This can be the fun bit. That one's not too bad. Just hold him. Looking good. Obviously if any of the pins are bent or out of place, that can be quite difficult. In this case it's gone in there very nicely. So now what we do is just solder two of the pads from above, and then we'll be flipping the ECU over to do the rest of the job. So we just put these in here. One on that side, one on the other side. There you go. Just make sure you don't have any solder slivers or anything around there. If you've got any on there, just clean them off with the cotton bud and acetone. Doesn't hurt to tidy those up. And then we'll flip it over and hang it off the side of the bench so that we can access those with our soldering iron. Okay, we've flipped the ECU over. The idea is you hang the adapter off the side of the bench, and then you can get at the soldering quite easily. So just clean your soldering iron. Now I'm using my usual big 2.4mm tip, but with 0.5mm diameter solder. Should find these are usually fairly easy to solder. It's only the size that's a problem. I like to use that big tip so I can get some heat in there nice and fast. And the small solder definitely makes a difference. I usually hold that iron at a slightly higher angle than this, but today I'm trying to keep it low so you guys can see what's going on. As you can see, even a wobbly old person can do a half reasonable job of this. Just try to stay on each joint for about the same amount of time as what I'm doing here. Don't stay on there too long, because that adapter ribbon cable is only plastic in between the conductors, and you will tend to melt it if you hang around too long. But you do need to stay on each of the pins long enough that the solder will actually go through to the other side of the board, so you get a little bit of penetration through to the other side, rather than the solder just sitting on the top on this side, which you need to avoid. So we're nearly done. You actually use quite a bit of solder doing this, lengthwise, because it is such short, small diameter solder. But it does seem to make for a better job using the small solder. It's worth getting hold of. Now this last one, once again you can see all the copper around it, and you can see that it does take a little while for that solder to take. If you have trouble with that, get in there with the heat gun and just warm things up again, and then you'll get it to penetrate through to the other side. But I sometimes stay on those for about 5 seconds. Now that we've soldered those joints, it pays to get in there. Again, yeah, I know, cleaning with our acetone, and just get rid of all of that flux and gunk so that we can have a good look at those joints and make sure everything is done properly. Once you've cleaned all of the flux and grime off of your work, just go along with an eyeglass and have a really close look. Make sure that all the joints are soldered, and make sure there's no grime or solder slivers or solder balls or anything between those pads. Should look something like that. Alright, now we're ready to fit our board. Just have a look at the board before you actually fit it to the ECU. You should see that the base image matches the part number of the ECU. In this case it's AA502, which is a R34. And then have a look at the table here. We'll tell you where the jumpers should be. This should all be set up for you when you get the board. You shouldn't have to touch it, but it doesn't hurt to check. So in this case we can see ER34 is J1 plus J3. So if we go over on the other side of the board here, just check our jumpers, we should have J1 plus J3 for R34, and the program jumper that's only used for flashing the base image in the board, that must be open. All of the details for those jumpers are in the NIStune guides online. Alright, so we can put our board in now. It will be sitting in the ECU approximately like that, just held in with the 4 screws. You can see this board here is a little bit close, so don't be afraid to bend them back. Just go carefully, try to spread the load, give them a gentle bend, and you'll also find that these components here can be a bit of a problem for the connector on the underside of the board. So this one here, give them a bend out of the way, and same with that capacitor, can be a bit of a pain, but the leads on those are quite pliable, you're not likely to break anything. Alright, grab your board, and it's just a matter of lining up that header with the header socket, push it in firmly, and everything should be just fine. I might bend that IC over just slightly more, so just make sure that there's nothing touching underneath that's going to stop the board from sitting down nicely. So put our 4 screws in, and that'll make sure that the board is held down nice and securely. We don't want the board flapping around in the vehicle. Sometimes these threads can have a little bit of coating in them that needs to be cleaned out, but generally R34s are pretty good and you won't have any problems. Alright, we'll just refit our covers and we're done. Be careful with this one side's got a bit of a cutaway on it. Oh, nice and sharp too. That goes on the connector side. I did put one on the wrong way once. It gets a bit ugly. Get him on there. Now Mr. R34 is pretty much ready for some tuning. All done. Thanks for watching.